Hey, friends, and welcome to the next episode of Priceless Backstories podcast. I'm Amy Price Bromberg, and I'll be your host today. I'm like super excited because my friend Tanya Motorin, who I know as Tanya Villavicencio from back in the day, but I'm excited to welcome on my friend Tanya to the show. Tanya is on staff with Athletes in Action at UCLA. She has 3 kiddos and is married to Nikita, and she's recently written a book that we're going to talk about more of her story in the book that she's about to publish. So, but Tanya, great to have you on the show.
Amy, thanks so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, here's the deal. You have antlers on right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear the jingles. And I am wearing an ugly Christmas sweater. And our listeners, I love that they're tuning in today. It is Christmas week, and we are going to spill the beans that we are actually recording this in November. Today is November 11th. But we so want to get in the Christmas spirit, as our people are tuning in. So we're going to start off, Tanya, with the first 4 questions, which we do on every podcast, and just to get to know you better and kind of some different things about you. So thankfully I sent you these in advance, right?
That's right. I could prepare a little bit, except for the changes that you made like 5 minutes ago, but that's okay.
That's a good point.
I can go with it.
Okay. All right. Well, the first question is, Tanya, what is like one of your favorite Christmas movies?
Okay. I saw this when you sent this to me and I was like, she's totally setting me up. She knows I'm going to say Elf. Of course, she knows I'm going to say it because we saw it together in the movie theater, and there are no other Christmas movies in my mind other than Elf, and it makes me laugh every time I watch it. So
That's hilarious. Yeah, we have in our family, Jason and I, we have a discussion about Elf versus It's a Wonderful Life, and is Elf like actually considered a classic? Because I believe Elf should be a classic.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I made my kids watch It's a Wonderful Life last year, and they were like, why are you making me watch this? This is the worst movie ever. I'm like, I swear it's going to get better,
Yeah.
But yeah, the Elf is just like constant entertainment throughout. So
Yeah, totally. One of my favorite things, Tanya, thinking back to our times with AIA, Tanya actually co-discipled me when I was in college as a senior, and one of the favorite things, as you said, I set you up, is my senior year. Like and I remember you inviting me, saying, "Hey, would you want to go watch a movie in the middle of the day?"
Yes,
like a matinee. It might have been finals week, I'm not sure, but it was around Christmas time. And what did we do?
We saw Elf.
Who else was in the theater?
Who else?
Nobody.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Do you remember that? We were the only 2 people in the theater, and this was the premiere when Elf was first coming out, and we could just laugh like as loud. I remember your laugh, like just laughing as loud as we could because there was nobody else in that theater that day.
I think I seriously saw that movie 3 times in the theater. And one of the times, like, someone went by and was like, that's the girl that was laughing so loud. So
I think in our Instagram post, we should probably have like an Elf or It's a Wonderful Life little competition, just kind of see what people vote for,
Yes.
So, absolutely. Well, on to the second question. Speaking of Christmas and that theme, like what is like a favorite meal or a favorite food during the Christmas holidays for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ties into like a family tradition too around Christmas time, which is my dad was Mexican, and so growing up like in the Mexican culture, like a lot of times people make tamales at Christmas time. And so that was like a big deal for our family. And yes, I love the tamales and they were so amazing and we still do that, but I think tied to that was just like this precious time with my dad and my grandma, and like my dad was the youngest of 9, and so all my aunts and uncles were there, and like everyone's just telling stories, and it was just such a special time to create memories and to learn about my family heritage as well.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's pretty incredible how like food, like, gathering around food really creates memories, and it even reminds us of home, it's just a sense of home.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
all right, number three, share with us, like, what's one of your favorite hobbies? If you had spare time in the midst of, right, being a wife and a mama and running a ministry at UCLA with Nikita, like what's one of your favorite hobbies?
You know, when you asked me that question, I was like, gosh, you think it would be like this easy answer, right? Like, oh, these are my hobbies. And if you were interviewing Nikita, he would easily be like, oh, it's surfing, it's this, it's that, And I feel like I've struggled for a while, like, what are my hobbies? And I think like I don't have a ton of extra time. But
Yeah.
as I was thinking about it, like one thing that I do love, and you're gonna totally laugh at me, but so I like shopping at Anthropologie, the sale, like anytime they're having a sale. And so, they always give you like these beautiful bags, and they have like some creative like picture or just color scheme. And so I never want to throw them away. So I started taking them, and I started making them into envelopes. So I like created this template, and then I would cut them out, and I would make envelopes, and then I would cut like this little piece of note card and use it just for like a birthday, or if I just want to say a quick hello to someone. And so it's just like really special. And I don't know. I don't know if that's really a hobby, but it's something that makes me feel good. I feel like I'm not wasting the bag, and I'm making something beautiful. The other thing, again, not really a hobby, but I love rearranging things. One of my strengths finder top 5 strengths is arranger. And so I love just taking things and making it better. And so like,
Hmm.
how can I rearrange the space, or even like as I was writing my book, and this actually kind of became like something I had to push through, because I was arranging my words so much that like it
Hmm.
slowed me down. And at one point I just had to like, okay, just get the words out there, and then you can come back later and rearrange them or fine tune them. But yeah, I really love like arranging things and just making a space even better.
I love that. Yeah. I think I would consider that a hobby. That's pretty cool.
Yay.
Yes, it made the hobby list. I'm reading a book called Chase the Fun by Annie F. Downs. It's kind of
Oh,
like a daily thing, but currently the theme is hobbies. And
no
she actually
way.
defines like what's a hobby. So that might be interesting to look at. But she mentions like when she defines a hobby, it's something that you have to look at the actual definition, but it's something that you're not making money to do. You know what I mean? Like she said, when you start like making money, it becomes more of a job than really like a hobby, just something you enjoy. So I would
Yeah.
say that's a pretty good hobby right there. That's
Thank
pretty
you.
cool.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a good
So
book too.
yeah, feel free to check it out. I've been kind of giving it out to some different friends. Yeah, it's a
Mm.
really good book. So the next one is, what is a favorite Christmas song
Hmm.
and or a song that you just like to work out to or worship? So however you want to answer that.
Oh man. Um, I'm like kind of notorious for never knowing like who sings what song and what the name of it is and all of that. I mean, I know my Christmas songs, right? But like I would say I don't necessarily have a favorite Christmas song, but one thing I love to do like during the Christmas season is just playing Christmas instrumental music. So, like, even if I'm up early and I'm making the kids' lunches or helping them to get ready for the day, and I'm kind of maybe I'm like dragging, and I'm not a coffee drinker, so I can't use that to kind of perk me up. But when it's like cold and kind of dark out, like I'll put on some just Christmas instrumental music, and it just brings so much peace and reminds me of the Christmas story and just God's love. So
Hmm.
so yeah, I guess it's more general, but that's like a cool rhythm that I kind of
Hmm.
established during the Christmas season. And sometimes I'll even do it like at different times in the year, because um we always need that reminder. But and
Yeah.
then other songs, I don't know, I just love Shane and Shane. I can't recall like a certain song that they sing, but love them. And then I did have my daughter look up. I was like, what's that one song that I always love when it comes on? Because at night I'll when I'm putting the kids down, I'll lay down with them and I'll play a worship song on Pandora or whatever. And so there's one called what is it? To the One, and it's Jen Johnson and Bethel Music. Oh my gosh, it makes me cry every time.
I need to check that out. To the One is what it's called.
To the One. It's so good.
Very cool. On the way here, like in preparation, I have to admit, I did listen to Christmas music. My neighbor does have their Christmas lights up, which I wasn't sure what to do with because we still have like pumpkins out, like, you know, like the Hobby Lobby decorations for like the fall season. So it's that in between time. And yeah, and this a song that I heard that you might want to check out, I enjoyed was by Katie Nicole. And it's called God is in Your Story. And I thought, how, like, in coming into this podcast, I just thought, how specific is that? You know, so
that's crazy, actually, because now that you say that, I feel like a friend of mine recommended that a while back, but I don't know if I just got distracted. I never listened to it, but I'm pretty sure that she was like, this reminded me of you. So
it could be. Yeah.
I need to listen to that.
So, well, I would love to shift gears. Thanks for giving us a little insight into the different areas of your life and some of these fun things. I would love to shift gears, and I'm so blessed to, honestly, Tanya, just to get to share you with others, with my friends, with new pod listeners, even as your friends or family, you know, are listening in. Like it's an honor to get to share this conversation with others. Honestly, I'm going to share this at the beginning so I don't forget, but like you've impacted my life in a special way. And so I know the story you're about to share is very authentic, and your relationship with God is something that's real and it's worth sharing. And you've been through a lot these last few years, and that's a big part of your story that you're going to share today. But yeah, through being discipled by you through Athletes in Action, and even with both of us being in the same leadership group more recently through the learning community, like it's just been a blessing to get to have just to be able to see what God's doing in your life. So so we are going to shift gears. We're going to talk about, actually, this is the time if you want to take the antlers off.
I think I might, because they kind of make all this noise and I don't want to distract the listeners.
Yes. I'm going to continue to wear my ugly sweater. If any listeners haven't bought one yet, they should probably check out Goodwill or something, right? It's about that time to get a sweater. But I will wear the ugly sweater for the whole podcast.
Love it.
So, well, Tanya, the name of your book is called Covered: My Breast Cancer Story and Practical Insight for Yours. You are a recently published author, from what I've heard. Is that true?
Yes.
And what is the name of the book that you recently were a part of? Can you just kind of share that with us first of all?
Yes. It's called The Life of an Unknown Author. And there's 15 of us that contributed. And basically we wrote essays and kind of our perspective on what it means to be an unknown author and kind of the process that's been behind that. And, you know, I think like in writing this book, I didn't realize maybe we'll get into this later, but like, it wasn't like, okay, I'm an author and I want to start writing all these books. No, it was more so like, oh my gosh, I found myself in this story of getting this cancer diagnosis and just feeling like compelled, like I have to share this story. I have to share and help other women and talk about what God is doing in my heart and in my life. And so anyway, now I'm like an author, right? But it's like, okay, well, what do I do with that? And just realizing, man, I didn't know how hard it was to get your work out there, you know? So like, it's not like, oh, you just write a book and then you send your manuscript into the publishing house and they just love it. And they like, sign a deal with you. And so I found some people that started something called the Unknown Authors Club, and their goal is to put out an anthology once or
Hmm.
twice a year and kind of highlight these different unknown authors and giving them some exposure. And also, it's not going to hurt now because I can say like I'm a published author, and so maybe as I continue moving towards getting my own book published, that might be something that would help me in the future. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great experience, and I love, it's pretty cool to see your name in print and know that you were a part of something that's going to impact other writers
Mhm.
and other people. So
Yeah. Well, congratulations. That's super exciting, and
thank you.
just a cool network that God's allowed you to be a part of. And yeah, part of our hope here, it is for sure to unpack your story and hear the backstory. But also, yeah, would love to even hopefully give access that if there's someone out there who hears your story. I recently was able to read, right, an unedited copy of your book. And I mean, it's so worth, like, I have friends I'm already thinking of, honestly, that I would love to share it with. And so prayerfully, God will use this podcast as another stepping stone for someone to hear your story and say, I actually would love to sign Tanya in her book, and help get it published. So, but would you tell us more about your book? You had mentioned to me, this book is the book that I wish I would have had during my breast cancer journey. Would you tell us more about your book and what it's about? And then also go into sharing with us more of your personal story behind the book.
Yeah. Well, just to give you some context, so I was born and raised in California and lived in Orange County, and then went to school at Pepperdine, and so very much like a California native. But then when I joined Athletes in Action, I moved to Ohio, and that's how I met you, obviously. But then I was gone for like 15 years from
Mm.
California. And the last place that we were in before moving back to California in 2018 we were in Seattle, Washington. And so, we were doing ministry there. And in the course of the time that we were there, my dad had a stroke. Actually, he had the stroke before we were in Arizona, or I'm sorry, before we were in Seattle. But when we were in Seattle, he actually passed away.
Mm.
And, so just felt like on my heart that like God wanted us to be closer to my family and being able to help my mom and, just, yeah, get more time with her and wanting to treasure her relationship more and more. And so, I felt like God was kind of like pulling me back to California, and Nikita and I weren't exactly on the same page initially. And then, then we got there. And so I'm giving you this whole story because basically I was in the throes of like, preparing to move, and we were doing all the things that you do before you move, right? Like trying to
Yeah.
see people and visit all your favorite spots. And in the midst of that, I was doing like child checkups for my kids and dental appointments, all the things that you want to just get out of the way, because I don't want to have to scramble to find a dentist right away or doctors for them. Like, let's just get it over with here before we move. So, included in that was me getting my mammogram. And so I went to get my mammogram, and I had noticed some changes in one of my breasts, but it wasn't like what everyone describes, like, oh, a lump, or you know something that was like really obvious. And so I mentioned it to my OBGYN, and I was having my annual exam with her, and she did an exam, and she's like, everything looks normal, like everything's great. So then the next day I went for my mammogram, and I had never walked into my mammogram more confident and just like,
Mm.
I'm good, and then I can't remember what day of the week that was, maybe like a Wednesday. And by Friday, they contacted me and they're like, we need more images. And I was like, what does that mean? And so I just was reeling and just kind of trying to like have a category for that, because I thought, God, all the
Mm.
stress that I'm under right now and all the things that have to fall into place to make this move happen. And we're trying to like stage our home and get it sold and like, I don't have time for this, right? I don't have time to have like a life-threatening diagnosis. And so I'm going to be fine. That was, I just kind of convinced myself, and I told them like, hey, I'm moving in like a week. So, what should I do? And they squeezed me in. Anyway, long story short, I went back for those images, and then it led to like an ultrasound and then a biopsy. And basically they're like, I would be shocked if it wasn't cancer. And so the next day was when they called me to confirm that it was cancer. It happened to be my birthday, which was just, of course, we couldn't get through a podcast without me crying, Amy. But I think it was just devastating. And I felt so blindsided. Just, yeah, there's really not words for it. And I tried to describe it in my book, but it's kind of one of those situations that's just beyond words. And I just felt like my world had begun to crumble around me, and like the foundation that was underneath me wasn't there anymore. And so in my book, I talk about that. I talk about, what it was like to get this diagnosis and how I was reeling, and, just how talking about like, my process of like talking to God, and how, just the different stages that I would go through, like, how could you let this happen? And why me? All of those things. And then kind of vacillating and going back and forth between like so much anger and sadness and grief, and then belief at the same time. And just like, you're all I have, God. Like, I don't know what else to do. I can't turn to anything else. So I have to lean into you, even though you feel a little bit unsafe right now. And I'm not sure that I can trust you. But I think, in the book, when I was sharing with you earlier that like, this book is the book that I wish I would have had during my journey. What I meant by that is that there's so much more than just cancer in your body, right? When you get a diagnosis like this, you have spiritual needs, you have emotional needs, and then you have like just the practical side of like, I don't know what the heck to do here. I don't know what the protocol is. Like, who do I talk to? We didn't have a history of breast cancer in my family. So I wasn't like, oh, this is what this person did, or I can talk to so-and-so, so I was just scrambling. And so I really felt like I want to write a story and share my story of, yes, my struggle with the Lord, and also just renewed faith in the midst of this dark season, but also give women that are coming after me tracks to run on, and say like, don't do this, do this, or this was my experience, and take it for what it is. You don't have to do everything that I did. And certainly recognizing that everyone's journey is so different, right? So like, just because I did this or experienced it that way doesn't mean that your story is going to be exactly like that. But I really wanted a place for women to come and feel cared for, to feel known, and not alone in the midst of this really scary time. But also, like I said, some practical insight to help them navigate these uncertain waters.
Yeah. Tanya, as your friend, like, it was, just what you just shared. I appreciate just your honesty, because I think as a friend during that time at a distance, being in Ohio, and for you living in California, I guess at the time it was Seattle before your move, it was really, as a friend, it was hard to know how to even just like, how is she doing? Like, that might seem like such a ignorant question, but it sounds like even what you're sharing, like everybody probably experiences the diagnosis, right? The news differently, especially in like seasons of grief. Like what is grief looks different for everyone. But you
Yeah.
call it the day the wheels came off, and when I read that title to that chapter, I thought, I mean, that just brings a lot of, in some ways, clarity of like literally just being blindsided. Like this was not, would you say this? I mean, this is probably obvious, but I'm wondering, would you say this was not what you expected to be part of your story, or to write this book was not necessarily on your mind 10 years
Yeah.
ago?
Oh my gosh. Like, I think you always wonder, like, everyone goes through hard times and you don't know what your hard times are going to be. Right.
Yeah.
But you fear it as a woman. It's like, dang, like this could happen. Right. But based on my history, and there were no other indicators that this would be something that would happen. And honestly, my breasts were so small. I was like, how could there even be cancer in there? Right. Like, really, God, like this, how did that even happen? But yeah, certainly this wasn't what I was expecting. But even I kind of touched on the fact that my dad passed away, and like he had a stroke 6 years before he died. And we were blindsided in the midst of that. And I think my mom said something really insightful as we were going through those 5.5 years after his stroke, is that this was the ministry that God chose for them. And she was like, it wasn't the ministry I would have chosen for myself. Right. And yet I loved how she was like willing to see this hardship and this difficult time as an opportunity to make Christ known. Like my dad was living in a skilled nursing facility and he couldn't speak. He couldn't, he was paralyzed on the right side. It was devastating for our entire family. But like, my mom was there like every day, sometimes 3 times a day. And, those people got to see her love and devotion to him. And just, again, like this was the ministry that God had chosen for them. And so I feel like even as I was handed this diagnosis, no, it is not what I would have chosen for myself. And it's like, it's so hard that the lessons that are so impactful in our lives, and the lessons that changed the trajectory of our lives, are oftentimes those dark valleys, the valley of the shadow of death. And it's like, God, can't you just, and I write about it in my book, like, can't you just teach me those hard things through like great podcasts, like, Priceless Backstories, or, can't you teach me that through like a cool book, right? Or a great sermon. But, oftentimes, like, I agree with C.S. Lewis when he talked about that pain is God's megaphone, and he will use that to get our attention and to form us and make us more like him. And I think, like, if the goal of us as Christians is to be more like Christ, and Christ had to suffer and die, then how do I think that I can become like him without also suffering? And I hate it. I hate it for myself. I hate it for those of you listening. Like, I hate that this has to be part of our story. But we definitely have a choice. Like, how are we going to receive that suffering? And I wanted to be one of those people that was like, oh, to God be the glory, and like, just so positive. And I wasn't, and I'm still not. There are still times when I'm just like, I hate this, God, and I don't understand it. But I, at this very same time, trying to allow him to use it for his kingdom and for his glory.
Wow. Yeah, that's, it's heavy. It's like really hard and beautiful, like at the same time, like how he uses trials in ways that when we need to be comforted, like we have the opportunity to comfort others. But I don't think that's something that I would personally be like, I just want to think about that while I'm going through, right? This cancer. Like it's not that is that the thing that gets you through? Or is that the thing like for you, now that you're a breast cancer survivor, right? And this point, you're cancer free, praise the Lord.
Yes.
Is that something that, yes, like, is that something that in this part of your story is more relevant? Do you know what I mean? Like what got you through, like day by day, like, Tanya, I'm just thinking about, you talk about the losses, right? The hair loss. You talk about how do I talk to my kids about this, that part of the journey. You talk about the loss of even physically as women, right? That God has given us breasts. But to have some things removed and how that impacts potentially our relationship with our spouse or our relationship with ourselves and how we view ourselves. So there's this whole area of loss, right? And then you also talk about how there were days that you chose celebration in the midst of carrying cancer. And so I've been able to kind of see a glimpse of how day by day, but really what was getting you through it? Like, what did that look like? Just kind of speak into that.
Man,
I know it's a loaded question.
it's so loaded, but
Yeah.
I think honestly, it was different day to day. I mean,
Okay.
it was like, man, I'm going to keep crying throughout this whole podcast. It was like, and I don't mean to over spiritualize it, but it was like manna from heaven, like God just giving me what I needed for that day. Because there were some days where I was just like, I cannot do this, God. Like, it's just too hard. And you're stretching me beyond what I can bear. Right. So some days it was me in my back room, just sitting on the couch, looking out the window, looking at the bougainvillea and being reminded of like God's beauty and how he cares about the details even of a beautiful flower, or me listening to a Lauren Daigle song, or spending time in the word, or maybe it was a friend texting me and just out of the blue, I'm thinking of you and I'm praying for you and I'm so sad that you have to go through this and I'm with you. And it was just I didn't know how to get through it. And God was the one that was like, I'm going to lead you through this. I am with you. Like, what he says in Joshua, like, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Just be strong and courageous, Tanya. And it wasn't just like, oh, a pep talk. Just be strong and courageous. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think that was very much like my mentality before. Just rely on my abilities, and yes, I have God, but like I was a very capable person. Right. And you get to this point where you're like, I have nothing left. I cannot do this, God. I've reached the end of myself. And so he's like, I'm here. Right. And the reason why he tells us to be strong and courageous is because in the verse before that, in Joshua 1, I think, verses 1-9, somewhere in there, he's saying, I am with you. Right. I will never leave you and forsake you. And so it's almost like there should be a therefore in there. Therefore, be strong and courageous.
Yeah.
Right. And so he wasn't asking me to do something and pull from something within myself. He was asking me to pull and draw from his strength and allowing him to carry me when I couldn't take one more step. And there were friends of mine that had gone through cancer, or just people that I had met along the journey that I didn't know before, but we bonded quickly because of our shared experience. And just them reminding me, like, this, you have to do it one day at a time. Like, there's so much that's so scary along the journey, like even after having my surgery, and like, my oncologist is telling me you're cancer free, right? We're going to do
Mm,
the chemo and we're going to do the radiation, as extra measures to make sure that this doesn't come back. You're young, you have young kids, you need to be around for a long time, and so, like it felt there was this relief that like, okay, we're doing these things to make sure that I'm going to be healthy and around for a long time. But there was still so much fear,
mm,
just like those what ifs. And, I talk about in my book too, like, um, remembering back to like the single days when you're like dating someone, and let's say, you've been dating and they break up with you, or you break up with them, and whatever, you wake up in the morning, and maybe it's like the day after the breakup, and you wake up and you're like, oh, it's gonna be a great day, and then all of a sudden you're just like reminded of what just happened,
mm,
like, oh my gosh, we're not together anymore, this is so sad, and it sounds like a stupid example, but I just, it was like the closest thing that I could come to, just like this feeling of dread that kind of was following me. And like I did get some relief like when I was sleeping, right? But then if I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, like it was like the first thing that I would think of.
mm,
And that's a lot. It's a lot to carry. And so just this integration and this balance of like, yes,
mm,
I feel hopeful and I feel thankful that you're with me, God, and I want to be strong and courageous. Can you do that through me? Because I'm feeling really scared, and all the
yeah,
what ifs can just bombard you,
mm,
So
yeah,
you can't get too far ahead of yourself. You can't think that far down the road, but just, I mean, just talking about what did he say in Matthew, like, don't worry about tomorrow, right? There's some real wisdom in that, and just enjoying what he has for you in this moment.
yeah. Yeah, that's I would imagine just really helpful for women to hear in the midst of maybe feeling unseen or unheard, or that cancer is my story right now, like it's all of who I am,
Mm,
because of carrying it, daily, waking up and it's still there. And so to hear like that you're seen and that you're heard, even if not one person here on this earth sees or hears you, there's a God who sees you, and there's a God who hears you. Like when you cry for help, there's a God who allows you to say anything that's on your heart. That's one thing I've seen in you, Tanya, is that you've been incredibly honest with God about how you're feeling in the process, knowing that he is a God who will never leave you. Like he promises that in Joshua 1:9. He promises that multiple times,
yeah.
in his word. And so to know that who God is and what his word says about him will never change. But
Mm,
every day, like just reading your story in your book makes me realize, like, for this person's story, like every day probably feels very unpredictable, in terms of doctor's appointments, surgeries, holding hope and disappointment
mhm.
potentially, in the same at the same time
Right.
is very, for all of us, whether it's cancer or something else in our life, like, just holding that loss or disappointment and hope is a real part, of our story. And so you had an A team. Like I know that was a big part for
Mm.
you that played in. You said there's some essentials in the journey. Would you tell us more about some of those essentials, if you want to lean in there to your A team, or any practical things that would be beneficial for women to hear, on this podcast?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So moving into more like the practical side of my book, I do talk about having your A team, right? So like having this team of people that are going to get you through it. And it reminds me of the story of the paralytic, right?
Mm,
And he has his friends on the four corners of his mat and carrying him to Jesus. And there were so many days, and just such long stretches of time during this journey where I was like, I want to be with him, but I can't get there. And I need
Mm.
these people, right? And so some of those people were just the experts in their field, like my breast surgeon or my oncologist or radiation oncologist, even the technicians, like just caring for me and finding like the best people to do what they do, right? But then also just finding the right friends too. And it's interesting because when you go through something like this, it's very difficult for the person going through it, obviously, but it's excruciating for the people around them too.
Mm.
And like everyone reacts to tragedy and a diagnosis like this very differently. And to be honest, there were some friends that I expected would be there for me. And I thought, these are the people, these are going to be the people that carry me. These are going to be the people on my four corners of my mat. And some of them just weren't. Maybe it was because of circumstances that they were going through in their lives. Maybe it was just too hard for them to watch me struggling. And, so I think just recognizing that sometimes like God is, yes, we need to be active and asking for help. But also God will lead you or lead them to you sometimes. There was a friend of mine that I had known from college. And like, so we had moved back to California right after my diagnosis. And so I had a lot of people that I knew in this area, but with the LA traffic, it's not like, I don't know, it's just far, like
Yeah.
even though they're not that far, it's like, it'll take an hour to get there, because of the traffic and whatnot. But um, one friend that I'm thinking of in particular, my friend Liberty, she just showed up for me, and she was checking in and she was caring for me and loving on me. And out of all the people in my life, and moving back to California, I never would have been like, oh, it's going to be Liberty. I mean,
Mm.
we just barely talked. Like we weren't like this tight. We didn't have like this tight friendship or something. And so it was just really cool to see God's goodness, caring for me and through that A team. And like one of the elements of the A team too is just like finding fun friends.
Mm.
Um, like it was such a gift to me, like being new in back to California. Like I'd never lived here with my family. I had only lived here with my family, my family of origin.
Yeah.
And I was single when I lived here. And so now like my kids are in school and whatnot. So anyway, like my son was in kindergarten when we moved back, and some of the moms had approached me and others, and they're like, hey, we want to have a mom's night out and let's do this. And I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I'm like, this is exactly what I need. And the whole night, they all knew. I think I was even at that point, like wearing my wig, and they all knew like what I was going through. And no one mentioned cancer once. And it was like the greatest gift for me.
Mm.
Like we just got to like have some wine, enjoy a great meal, laugh so hard. And I
Mm.
remember Nikita like calling one of my friends because he had texted me and he couldn't get a hold of me for some reason. And I think I was just having too much fun. And so then he like contacted one of them and was like, is Tanya with you? Is she okay? But it was just so great to like have a stinking break from cancer, like have a place where, okay, I don't have to talk about it
Mm.
for a few hours, and that was such a gift for me. And then there's going to be other times when, you need to have a friend to just cry to and go deep and talk like, I freaking hate this. And I can't get out of bed today.
Mm.
So that kind of thing. Another thing I talk about is just really giving yourself permission, right? To be right where you're at And, I even, I even put in there like a sample permission slip, like fill it out, give yourself permission, and you fill in the blank, like permission to not have the same capacity that you had before all of this, permission to take a break, go to the beach for the day, or, I don't know, just any fill in the blank, anything that you may need. And it's going to be different for everyone. And it's, even for me, it was different from day to day, but really being in tune with, the Holy Spirit, and also just my own needs, and recognizing like, yeah, right now I don't want to be around people. Nikita, can you take the kids? Can you field any calls or any people that are bringing over meals? I don't want to interact with anyone. I just need to be with God. Or other days when I was like, I need to go for a walk, or I need to grab a bite to eat with someone. And yeah, it just varied from day to day. So giving yourself permission to be just wherever you are on a given day.
Yeah. Nikita, I love that in the end of your book, you have an area where you allow Nikita to share his thoughts of what it's like as your husband, and kind of briefly his journey in this. And one thing that he talks about is how he gave himself permission as well as a husband, so how you mentioned how it impacts yourself, but also your family, and how you guys are in it together. But for him to say, yeah, I'm going to go surfing one day, like, just what are the things as the woman who has the cancer journey, the diagnosis, but also for the family, for him to say, I had to kind of gauge, what do I need? How can I best serve my wife? And in the midst of that, what are moments where maybe I need to get filled up because I'm pouring out a lot into our family? And I love how also, as people get your book, like a copy, like they're going to get to see also in your kids' perspective of what it was like for them, and what it was like to hear news from mom and dad, and just how hard it was, and how they, as elementary or middle school kids, like how they were navigating personally in very different ways, the realities of what you're going through. And they talk about family fun day. Like that's another thing that you talk about in your book, that just give really great ideas as women are saying, I don't know what to do today. If they buy a copy of your book, they'll be able to see like maybe some of the things along the way for you that really helped. How did you pick out a wig? Just these real life things that, like you said, if we haven't known someone in the same position, I would imagine it's really hard to know how to navigate just day in and day out. So but I love that you get your family's perspective, even in how they were able to get filled up in the midst of carrying it with you, as a family. And one thing I would love for you to touch on, as we're wrapping up here, just a couple things. One is that there is a village that God had placed around you. And so as people are listening and maybe thinking like, I have a friend who has recently found out that they have cancer, or a family member, what are some of the do's and don'ts? Like, don't give us the whole list. There's a very extensive list in your book that I think is so incredibly helpful. Like, I never would have thought the color pink would have showed up on that list, right? But what are just a couple things that for you, at least, you would say were some really helpful do's and don'ts for your village as friends and family are saying, how do I come alongside you? Would you share a few of those with us?
Yeah. I do love the color pink, but now it's like, it's taken on a whole nother meaning. I'm like, can you send me anything pink, please? Yeah, I think some of the do's and don'ts, like, I don't know, some of them seem so obvious, but yeah, like one time I was at someone's house, and I think people kind of like freeze up, and it's like they don't know what to say. So then they're like, oh, she has cancer. They're thinking in their head, she had cancer. I'm going to tell her a story about this other woman that had cancer. And I get that, like they want to be able to relate to you, right? But the story ended with this woman dying, and I'm like, guys, this is not what I need, right? Like, and I had to end up like excusing myself myself from the conversation, not like, it wasn't like abrupt, but I was just like, I need out of here,
Mm.
and like that's just not what someone needs, right? Like if you haven't gone through it, or you don't know what this person is experiencing, it's okay. But don't feel like you have to try to understand it.
Okay.
You can ask questions, you can be curious, but yeah, don't feel like you have to relate in some way, right?
Okay.
But also recognizing too that just because I'm going through, you know, treatment, or, I just had surgery or whatever, yes, cancer is a part of my story, but cancer is not who I am, right? I'm so much more than this element of my story. And
Mm.
and I think like that was one thing that was hard for me, that I didn't want to just get pigeonholed and labeled as like a cancer survivor, and
Mm.
that's my story. Like there's so much more to who I am, and God is not done writing my story. And I'm so thankful that I'm here and that I have more time. But yeah, just recognizing like there's so much more to that person. And so kind of be curious about everything, not just about this one season of life for that person.
It's really good. Even like Jenny's ice cream, is that, or was there a certain type of ice cream for you that kind of blessed you one day?
Oh, um, yeah, actually, so it wasn't Jenny's,
Okay.
although we do love Jenny's ice cream, but so Ben and Susie Thomas, which
Yeah.
and they went through their own cancer journey with Susie, and so we all met in Ohio, right? And so there's Grater's ice cream in Ohio, and they're living overseas in Rwanda, and one day we get this package and it's Grater's ice cream, and I'm like, what is going on, right? And so like I opened the package, and there's like a note from them. It said something like, you know ice cream, not that ice cream makes everything better, but like there's some days that you just need ice cream, something like that. And I was just like, I never would have expected like, oh yeah, ice cream is what you should bring someone. But it
Mm.
was just like so beautiful. And to someone that like, she's been through it, right? Their family has been through it, so they get that. And but it wasn't something magical like that only cancer survivors know about. It was just like, honestly, I feel like learning to listen to the Holy Spirit and asking him, what does this person need? How can I care for her right now? And then just doing it, right?
Mm.
Like instead of saying, hey, can I bring you dinner? Because some people, it's really hard for them to receive. So instead of saying, hey, can I bring you dinner? Change the wording and say, hey, I'm going to bring you dinner. I'm making chili. I'm going to make extra. What time can I bring it over?
Mm.
What day can I bring it over? What's convenient for you? Because I'm going to make you dinner. Right. And it might feel intrusive, like, oh, I shouldn't be pushing this on this person. But I think that was really helpful for me when people were
Mm.
like, I'm going to do this. You don't have you don't have a choice. I'm going to care for you. Right. Because sometimes you do begin to feel like a burden. But in reality, like these people that are watching you suffer, like they're suffering too. And they need something to do to care for you in a tangible way, to help
Mm.
lighten your load. And not that some chili or ice cream is going to fix it, or some flowers, but like all of those touch points reminded me, you're not alone, Tanya.
Mm.
You're seen and you're known. And even these people from far away are sending an In-N-Out gift card, or
Mm.
just something to let you know that they're with you in it, even though they're far away. And that was really beautiful. And honestly, just like tangible reminder that God is with me. It's really God caring for me through them.
Yeah, that is super helpful to know your person and ask the Lord, what's one way I can bless them today? And to really help alleviate, sometimes I can see why it would be hard to know what you need or even to receive. It's just, yeah, I just hear you saying it's very overwhelming. Like that's an understatement, but not to be afraid to reach out. And I think some of us do, like for myself, like it's easy to get stuck and like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And yeah, it's so helpful, Tanya. Well, thank you. I would love for you to finish this out by you've given us some great God perspective. Just this past week, you shared with me about the tapestry and that analogy and how that's really played into the way that you have viewed this season of your life, but also your story, your journey, and who God is. Would you kind of finish us out just by sharing with us about the tapestry and how that's impacted your view of God?
Yeah. I mean, probably the majority of us have heard that analogy before, but just like the messiness and brokenness of our lives. And, the back of the tapestry is messy. It looks knotted. It looks chaotic. Right. And, that's what we're seeing. And we see those broken pieces and those threads that seem to lead to nothing.
Yeah.
And yet God sees the bigger picture. And I think that that's what I had to come to this point was that, if God is allowing this, there must be something that I don't know, right? There must be something that I can't see that he can. Right. And so just recognizing that like, this isn't just random. It's not just a test, right? It's all of this is part of our story and part of this beautiful, really tapestry and this picture that he is painting of our lives. And it doesn't just say like, oh, look how strong we are, or look at what we've endured, but it's allowing our lives to be a reflection of his handiwork and the work that he's doing in and through us, and how beautiful and amazing he is. And I'm not going to lie, like it's really hard on some days, and you just feel like this is pointless and I don't know what you're doing, God, but he will give you glimpses of that tapestry and just like glimpses of where he's heading and where he's taking you. And that's really beautiful. And, I won't go into the whole thing, but in my book, I talk about the story of Lazarus and, just like Mary and Martha being so upset and wondering like, where were you, God? Like if you were here, this wouldn't have happened, and God's just plan and compassion for them, but also recognizing I have such a bigger story to tell through Lazarus. It's not just about him. It's not just about you guys, right? And so if we allow him, he wants to show his goodness and his beauty to the world, even through our brokenness.
Amen. Well, Tanya, I am so glad to be your friend, and I'm really grateful for you, and just that you're willing to not only keep your story to yourself, but to share with our podcast listeners, like really to share your story and ultimately God's story of what he's doing through you. And honestly, it genuinely is. I'm not trying to be cliche, but it's genuinely priceless. There's so much value to what you shared. And I think there are women who for sure have been inspired today, and hopefully prayerfully God will help them to be seen and loved and known and even prayerfully unstuck. So would you take a moment and just pray for our listeners or anyone who may be battling cancer right now? Like, would you be willing to do that to close us out?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
God, I thank you so much for this space and this opportunity, Lord, to hang out with Amy. And get to talk about you and our stories and just like what you're doing and how you lead us through the valley of shadow of death at different times, Lord. And yet it's not for no reason, right? You have purpose. And so I pray for anyone listening, God. It may not be cancer for them. Maybe it's another trial or obstacle that they're facing, and it doesn't make sense. And they don't know, God, what you're doing or why you're allowing this. I pray that you would draw near to them, Lord, and that you would remind them, God, that you are with them and therefore they can be strong and courageous. So we thank you so much for your goodness, God, and thank you for being a God that draws near, that goes through suffering yourself. And you're not just telling us from a distance, be strong, be courageous. You've experienced it, God. You've gone through that deep suffering. And so thank you that you're with us in it. And it won't always be this scary and it won't always be this hard. But we love you, God, and we thank you for your presence and your power and the plan that you continue to unfold in our lives. Love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you for hanging out with us today, and stay priceless.